Ladies and gentlemen, happy draft day. When you're watching this, we are just a few hours away from the NFL draft officially kicking off. Now, I used to do a lot of these first full round mock draft videos, but I started to move away from it as I'm covering my favorite team, the Denver Broncos, rocking the throwback Bo Nix jersey. But yeah, I used to do these a lot, but I wanted to get one full first round mock draft before the NFL draft starts just to kind of throw my hat in the ring of what I think is going to happen. Of course, it's not going to be correct, but yeah, this is just my prediction. So if you do enjoy, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel down below if you do enjoy the video. Now, like I mentioned, I'm a Broncos fan. That's who I cover. So if I pick a player that maybe is the right position, but you would prefer someone else, or if you would rather pick someone else who's still on the board, just in your mind substitute that in because I'm just doing what I think, but I don't know. You guys got the insights to your team, but with that being said, geez, let's go ahead. Let's jump straight in to my 2025 NFL mock draft. And if you have found me based on this mock draft, if you want me to do full first round mock drafts, let me know in the comment section below. Mostly cover the Broncos, but yeah, I would like to start making these more again as I used to do a lot in the past. But anyway, starting with the first overall pick, I do think it's going to be Cam Ward, and I think everyone has it being Cam Ward, with him going on live stream and, people asked him who's the best coach in the NFL. He said, Brian Callahan for the Titans. Who's the best receiver? He said Calvin Ridley, Treylon Burks. Who's the best running backs? He said Tajay Spears, right? So it's kind of seeming like it's going to be Cam Ward to the Titans at first overall, and rightfully so if this is your guy. Now, I'm not super high on the quarterbacks of this year's class. It kind of reminds me of a better 2022 quarterback class, right? I think obviously that was not a good quarterback draft. I'm not super high on these quarterbacks here in this draft, but if this is your guy, you absolutely have to take him for your future because if you believe in a quarterback, even if he's ranked lower down the board, positional value is going to shoot him up if he is your guy. So Cam Ward going first overall to the Tennessee Titans. And then here at number 2, I have the Browns going Travis Hunter, cornerback receiver out of Colorado. So it's interesting here, right? The Browns could take a quarterback, with the Deshaun Watson saga and everything going on. He might miss this entire upcoming season, but that's a tough contract to get out of. So I'm just having the Browns going best player available, and that's Travis Hunter out of Colorado. Although there is like a suspicion kind of in my gut, this gut feeling that I'm getting that it's going to be Abdul Carter here. But I don't know. Obviously, Browns fans will know better than I do, but I'm just kind of getting that gut feeling. But here I do have him taking my best player available in Travis Hunter. I do like him as a cornerback more than a receiver. And if I were the Browns, and obviously I'm not, I'm just some idiot on the internet, but I would have him play as a corner. And I know a lot of people have suggested this, but I would have him play as a corner and then give him some packages at wide receiver so he doesn't have to play a full game in the NFL, which is going to be obviously super exhausting. But they grab a phenomenal player in Travis Hunter here, and then they can look at potentially next year's class for a quarterback. Next year you got Arch Manning, you got Lenoris Sellers, you got Nico Iamaleava, potentially, depending on how he does this upcoming season. But there's some quarterbacks in next year's class. If you don't like any of the ones this year, don't reach for one and just take the best player available. And that's what I have the Giants doing here with Penn State edge rusher Abdul Carter. That's going to be one scary tandem of Abdul Carter and Brian Burns. Then the question becomes, what do you do with Kayvon Thibodeaux? Because is he going to want to be that third rotational edge rusher? Probably not. So maybe you look to trade him, or maybe you keep him as that third rotational edge rusher. But the Giants go best player available here in Abdul Carter out of Penn State. And man, that would be a scary edge rush duo with Brian Burns and Abdul Carter if he can become what we all think he can be as the third overall pick. And some people have him as their best player in this class. Now, before we move on to the next pick, there was actually something I saw. Now, take this with a grain of salt because there's a bunch of smoke screens and a bunch of stuff coming out that, looks like a team's going in a certain direction, but really they're going in a different direction and stuff doesn't happen. But apparently, Giants GM Joe Schoen's son posted a video to his Instagram story of Jackson Dart and kind of like a highlight tape of him, and then privated his account afterwards. So does that lean to the Giants potentially taking Jackson Dart? I don't know. I don't think so. Who knows at the end of the day? But I don't really think they're going to go in that direction. Maybe they do. Maybe they surprise us. But I just figured that was worth bringing up. If they don't believe in a quarterback, I don't know if they'll take one. But yeah, Joe Shane, Brian Dable could get desperate if they think, Jackson Dart can learn behind Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. We'll see. But I think they go best player available and Abdul Carter here at number 3. With the 4th overall pick, I have the Patriots going with Will Campbell, offensive tackle out of LSU. Now, I think this is the fairly common pick, right? But to me, the Patriots need offensive linemen. There is some concern that Will Campbell might have to kick into guard, due to the arm length. Some guys, it's not an issue like Rashawn Slater. Some guys, you do kick him into guard. But either way, I think if you take Will Campbell here and he has to play guard for you, I don't think that's a horrible scenario either, because you are protecting your franchise quarterback in Drake May. It sounds like the Patriots love Will Campbell, and it sounds like this is the direction they're going to go, but we'll have to see. It kind of reminds me a few years ago when the Titans took Peter Skoronski, and he was initially a tackle coming out of college, and you thought, is he going to play tackle? Is he going to play guard? Gets kicked into guard, and he's been a solid offensive lineman for them. Kind of reminds me of that scenario with Will Campbell, but I really like Will Campbell, and to me, he is the 4th overall pick in this year's draft. With the 5th overall pick, I got Mason Graham going to the Jaguars. Now, there have been rumors popping up today, yesterday, and honestly the past few days that the Jaguars could go Ashton Jeanty because they think apparently he's the missing piece to their offense. That's a report I saw a few days ago. I don't know if it's a credible source, when we just see stories popping up. But, when you think of the Jaguars, when they've been successful, typically they've had a solid running back, most notably Maurice Jones-Drew for me, but Mason Graham is the best interior defensive lineman in a really, really deep interior defensive lineman class. And to me, that's helping out your former 1st overall pick in Trayvon Walker. That's helping out your defense. You got Josh Hines-Allen over there, right? So who knows? You could help Trevor Lawrence, right? You have his former teammate and it's Travis Etienne. Trevor Etienne has brothers in this class, but Travis Etienne with him, you could go take a receiver here. That might be a little early. You could take a potential tight end here. Sorry if you can hear my dogs barking. But to me, you go best player available here, and that's Mason Graham, and just continue to build up your roster by taking the best player available. Right here at the 6th pick, geez, sorry about that. I have the 6th pick. I have the Raiders selecting Ashton Jeanty, running back out of Boise State. Now, as a Broncos fan, this really, really sucks, especially because we would love Ashton Jeanty. We would love him to go from a Boise State Bronco to a Denver Bronco. But trading up into the top 5, as the Broncos, I don't think we should do that. I think that's just going to be way too expensive. But Jeanty goes to the Raiders, and in back-to-back years, they get these generational prospects coming out in Brock Bowers at the tight end position, now Ashton Jeanty at the running back position to help Geno Smith, and then we'll see what happens with a quarterback. Maybe they target one in the 2nd round, maybe they trade back into the 1st and get a guy at the end of the 1st like a Jalen Milroe or someone like that, but they take Ashton Jeanty, best player available at this position, and just continue to build up that roster. And man, it would suck going against him 2 times a year here as a Broncos fan. Next up, at the 7th pick, I have the Jets going Armand Membu, offensive tackle out of Missouri, and this is just to protect Justin Fields. You took Olu Fashanu last year, who I really liked as a tackle, struggled last year, but I still have high belief in. Now you're getting those bookend tackles to protect your franchise quarterback, whether that's Justin Fields, whether that's Jordan Travis, whether you take another quarterback in this year's class, whether you take like an Arch Manning or someone next year. You're building up the offensive line to protect whoever your future quarterback is, and that's honestly a really smart move. You got the weapons. You got Breece Hall, who I like, who apparently has been rumored to potentially be traded. You got Garrett Wilson, who's a really solid receiver, right? You got these weapons. Now protect your quarterback of the future, who's right now Justin Fields, but they could be looking at someone in this year or next year's draft. With the 8th pick, I have the Panthers going Jalen Walker, edge out of Georgia. I think this is a common pick. The Panthers need a ton of help, and getting some pass rush is never a bad idea, right? They might be some of the most important, if not the most important positions on the defensive side of the football. Pressuring the quarterback is key. And Jalen Walker is one of the best edge rushers in the class. To me, he's number 2 behind Abdul Carter, right? So you're getting a very talented edge rusher right here in Carolina. You helped Bryce Young last year. You got JT Sanders, right? You got Xavier Legette. You got Jonathan Brooks, who did go down with an injury. You could potentially add another weapon, but here, help your defense and take BPA at this spot. That's kind of my philosophy, but yeah, Jalen Walker here would be a great pick for the Panthers. At number 9, I have the Saints selecting Shedeur Sanders, quarterback out of Colorado. And for the first time in a long time, the Saints take a quarterback in the first round. I'm not super high on Shedeur Sanders, but if the Browns or the Giants don't take him, or even potentially the Raiders, the Jets, you're getting a potential franchise guy who can sit behind Derek Carr. You know, I know you took Spencer Rattler last year. I know you took Jake Haener the year before that, but Shedeur Sanders is a guy who you could potentially develop to be your franchise quarterback since Drew Brees retired. And yeah, I think you have to go this route. If you, well, maybe not have to, but I think, you know, if he falls to 9, it would be very intriguing for the Saints to potentially draft a quarterback of the future. And so that's what I have them doing right here. With the 10th overall pick, I have the Bears selecting Omarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. Now, this might be a little bit high to some people, but if we remember back to a few years ago, the Lions, they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs earlier than a lot of people thought. And I think Ben Johnson wants to have a couple of those running backs to help out Caleb Williams. And Omarion Hampton is a true third down back. He can play on all 3 downs. He can be a solid pass protector in the backfield if you need him to. And so getting this extra weapon, I think, would be very beneficial to Caleb Williams. And, you know, I don't see him going to the Bears a whole lot in a lot of mock drafts, but it sounds like Hampton might go a lot higher than people suspect. And I do believe that landing spot is with the Chicago Bears. Moving on to the 11th pick. And by the way, if it wasn't obvious, I'm doing no trades in this mock draft. That's just too hard to predict. But yeah, not doing any trades. With the 11th pick, though, I do have the 49ers going with Kelvin Banks out of Texas. Just beefing up that offensive line. A couple of years ago, they lost Mike McGlinchey to my Broncos. They just lost, and I'm blanking on his name, a tackle to the Chiefs, right? So, to me, help Brock Purdy, who you're about to sign to a large contract extension, help him out, protect him, and you got him more offensive line help in Kelvin Banks Jr., who I really like. You know, maybe he's started to fall down the board a little bit from the preseason when he was honestly a top 5 pick to me. Slides down a little bit, but going 11 to the 49ers, helping out Brock Purdy, going to the Bay Area. I like this pick for the 49ers, and obviously I like it because I made the mock draft. But yeah, here at pick 12, I have the Cowboys going Teteroa McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. I was between him and Tyler Warren for the Cowboys. To me, I think you get another weapon. You got CeeDee Lamb, who's kind of your get open, make plays happen after the catch guy. And Teteroa McMillan could be, honestly, a jump ball guy for you. Just a different style of receiver from CeeDee Lamb going to the Cowboys here at pick 12. We're 13 minutes in, so I'm gonna try and speed this up a little bit, but Teteroa McMillan here is the pick at number 12 for the Cowboys. Starting to sound like he might fall in this draft. Maybe the Cowboys prefer a Matthew Golden who's in state. Maybe they want to go with one of the tight ends. But to me, they're going with Teteroa McMillan here at pick 12. At pick 13, the Dolphins get one of my favorite players in this entire draft in Will Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan. To me, he is a top 5 player in this draft. I absolutely love Will Johnson. And with Jalen Ramsey leaving, you fill in a slot. You get arguably the best corner. I think Travis Hunter might edge him out just slightly. But to me, I love Will Johnson. Now, he might be limited to the slot as a cornerback, but you could try him out on the outside, and I think he could make it work with how talented he is. I thought he initially was going to go, honestly, top 5. And then all of a sudden, he's just started to slide down boards. I think someone's going to get a steal with Will Johnson, and the Dolphins capitalize here at pick 13. Here at pick 14, I have the Colts selecting Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. Now, Warren, to me, he's a gadget guy. He can play all over the field. He can play in line as your tight end if you want him to. He can play as honestly, a slot receiver if you needed to. He has had some plays where he's thrown the football as well. So if you wanted to run a trick play where Tyler Warren throws the football, if you wanted to honestly hand it off to him, you could honestly do that. He's a gadget player, and he is a really, really solid tight end prospect. I don't think he's up there with the Kyle Pitts, the Brock Bowers of type of prospect when they were coming out into the draft. But I think he's, I'd say he's like the next tier down, right? So to me, I love Tyler Warren as a prospect. If he was available for the Broncos at pick 20, I would heavily consider it and maybe even go that direction. But I think he's going to go way, way early. So Tyler Warren here at pick 14 is headed to the Indianapolis Colts. Then at pick 15, I think the Falcons go with Mykel Williams, edge rusher out of Georgia. Now, if I'm honest with you, Mykel Williams was not my personal best edge rush available, but to a lot of people he is. And because he's in state at Georgia, they probably have done a lot of work on him. So I'm giving Mykel Williams to the Falcons to get pass rush help, which it seems like every year we say the Falcons need pass rush help. And last year, obviously, they go and draft Michael Penix, which ended up being a good move for them, actually, with how Kirk Cousins played. But they need pass rush. That is honestly their biggest need. We'll see if they do it this year finally at pick 15. But, of course, we'll have to wait to find out. Then here at pick 16, I have the Cardinals going with Jahdae Barron, the cornerback out of Texas. To me, I was seriously considering either going, obviously, Jahdae Barron here or with an edge rusher here. I end up going with the cornerback and helping the Cardinals solidify that defense and that secondary. Then at 17, I'm trying to speed this up. I'm going James Pierce Jr., edge out of Tennessee. He was actually my next best edge available over Mykel Williams, but I don't know. I just kind of feel like if he's in state, the Falcons are going to go that direction. But moving to the Bengals, I'm going James Pierce Jr. Obviously they signed Jamar Chase and T. Higgins to contract extensions. Now here in the draft, I think you have to focus on bolstering up that defense to get some stops because, a lot of your cap space is tied up to the offense. Let's help your defense out by drafting defensive heavy here, starting with James Pierce Jr. to pair with Trey Hendrickson, or even to be your edge one if Trey Hendrickson does end up getting traded or does end up leaving. You're able to have a really solid edge rusher here. I don't know why James Pierce fell. Honestly, it sounded like he was going to be a top 5 pick at the beginning of the year, and then maybe character concerns dropped him. But to me, James Pierce Jr. is a stud, and if he makes it all the way to 17, I think Bengals fans and the Cincinnati Bengals front office would be very, very happy. Moving on to the 18th pick, I'm going with Gray Zabel, offensive lineman out of North Dakota State. To me, and I feel like a lot of people feel this way too, Zabel can play every position across the offensive line from center, guard to tackle, right? And to me, I think he's going to play one of the interior positions, either a guard or the center. And it seems like the Seahawks every year, it's talking about they need interior offensive line help. They drafted Christian Haynes last year, I believe. They've tried to bolster that interior. So to me, get a guy who can move along and you can plug and play him anywhere you need. I would say maybe he's your center potentially, but I don't know the Seahawks super, super in depth. But Zabel is a very talented offensive lineman. And, to me, every year I hear the Seahawks need help on the interior. Zabel, to me, is the only interior guy I would take in the first tier. And so that's what I'm doing here with the Seahawks at pick 18. At pick 19, I'm going with Jihad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama to the Buccaneers. And this seems like a very common spot, right? What's his name? Not Devin White, Levante David. Levante David is getting up there in age. We'll see how much longer he has to play, but you got a guy who can come in and take over for Levante David whenever he does retire. Now, a lot of people thought that was going to be Devin White back in 2018. He didn't end up panning out how I thought he was going to play because I thought he was going to be a stud when the Buccaneers took him back, 8th overall in 2019. But Jihad Campbell is the pick here, and I think this is a very common fit, and he is the 19th overall pick. Now here it is, pick 20. For my Denver Broncos, who do I have as going? I think it's going to be TreVeyon Henderson. I really, really do. And maybe this is just because, in my personal opinion, I do prefer TreVeyon Henderson over Omarion Hampton, right? He's got the vision, or sorry, doesn't have the greatest vision, but he's got some solid breakaway speed, right? Has the ability to make players miss in open space, can pass protect in the backfield as well as he can be a receiver coming out of the backfield. To me, I kind of have this feeling that it's going to be TreVeyon Henderson. And if you're not a Broncos fan and you haven't watched my previous mocks, the three players that I personally want the Broncos to take are TreVeyon Henderson, Emeka Egbuka, or Luther Burden. One of those three is who I'm hoping for. I do think it's going to be TreVeyon Henderson, though, here at pick 20. Then moving on to 21, I do think the Steelers grab a quarterback in Jackson Dart. I think they grab a quarterback at some point in this draft, whether it's the first round or later. Who knows? But to me, Dart is the last quarterback I would probably take in the first round. Maybe you could make an argument for Jalen Milroe, but to me, it would be Dart here at pick 21 to be a guy who wouldn't come in and start right away, but could sit, develop for a year, maybe half a season, however long you want to wait, and then eventually take over, because everyone says it, but the Steelers are in this kind of limbo position where they're good enough to make the playoffs, but they don't go super deep in the playoffs, and then they're kind of out of striking distance for one of the top quarterbacks. And so take a shot on a guy here who you like, whether that's Dart, whether that's Milroe. Honestly, those are the two, if Shedeur doesn't fall, that I think the Steelers go in that direction. Although I do like Will Howard, right? But I do think that, to me, Dart is my number 3 quarterback. I think you go him here at pick 21. At 22, I have the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh reuniting with their tight end in Colston Loveland. Yeah, they need a weapon, whether that's at tight end or another receiver across from Ladd McConkey. I think to me, right here, they either go Loveland or Matthew Golden or potentially a defensive lineman. But with the Michigan connection, I do think that Jim Harbaugh goes Colston Loveland right here at pick 22. At 23, I think the Packers go Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas. Now, we'll see if they actually go offensive skill position, because every year it seems like they could potentially go with an offensive skill position, and then they don't, right? I mean, I guess you could say Jordan Love back in 2020, but it seems like every year they prioritize getting skill positions later outside of the first round. We'll see if that continues, but in my mock draft, I do have them going Matthew Golden, the wide receiver out of Texas. And then here at pick 24, I have the Vikings going Malachi Starks, safety out of Georgia. I know maybe some Vikings fans have some PTSD from when they took Lewis Cine. I don't know how well he's performed the last few years, but Malachi Starks, he is still my favorite safety in this entire draft class. I think he's really, really special. A lot of people might think Nick Eman-Warriors, but man, I really like Malachi Starks, and to me, he is the pick here at 24. Let's speed things up. At pick 25, I have the Texans going Josh Simmons after trading away Laramie Tunsil. Let's help bolster our offensive line, which was struggling last year, to protect our franchise quarterback in C.J. Stroud. So we get the best tackle still available in Josh Simmons. Here at pick 26, the Rams, ideally they probably would have liked Colston Loveland to fall to this spot, but they could use some help at the cornerback position, so they grab the fastest player at the combine in Maxwell Hairston, who ran a 4.28, I believe, to help out with their cornerback room. With the 27th pick, I have the Ravens going Kenneth Grant, the defensive lineman out of Michigan, to bolster that defensive line out in Baltimore. There's a couple places the Ravens could go. These teams here in the later end, they could honestly go in a multitude of different directions. And I have Kenneth Grant going here because he's a really talented player who fell to 27. So yeah, I do have him going with Kenneth Grant here. In 28, I have the Lions going Shamar Stewart, edge rush out of Texas A&M. Obviously Aiden Hutchinson went down in a freak accident last year. And so I have them bolstering that edge core and giving Aiden Hutchinson an edge rush partner, someone to rush the passer with him. And Shamar Stewart, this is a talented defensive line class, not only in the interior, but on the edge as well. And so Shamar Stewart is going to the Lions here in my mock at pick 28. At pick 29, I have the Commanders going Mike Green, edge out of Marshall. the Commanders don't have a lot of draft picks this year, and in the offseason and free agency and whatnot, they've bolstered their offense a lot, right? Trading for Deebo Samuel, trading for Laramie Tunsil. Now you get some help to your defense by selecting Mike Green, the edge rusher out of Marshall. With the 30th pick, we got the Bills selecting one of my favorite players in Walter Nolan, defensive lineman out of Mississippi. I talked and I texted my friend who is a Bills fan, and he said that he wants whoever is the best defensive lineman available at pick 30 because that is their biggest weakness. And Walter Nolan's here at pick 30 is someone who I could see going way higher than pick 30. I could see him, if the Broncos want to go defense, I could see the Broncos going with Walter Nolan. I am a big Walter Nolan fan, and the Bills grab him here at pick 30. And then moving on to the final 2 picks, I have the Chiefs grabbing Derek Harmon, defensive lineman out of Oregon. I know they signed Jerry Tillery to go opposite of Chris Jones, but man, with how deep this defensive line class is and Derek Harmon falling this far, who I know a lot of people are higher on. I'm not super high on Derek Harmon, but I do think he's a late first, early second round pick. Falling to him here at pick 31 bolsters that defensive line for the Chiefs, and I would absolutely hate this as a Broncos fan. And then here at pick 32, rounding out the first round, I have the Eagles selecting Nick Emmanwori, safety out of South Carolina. Obviously, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, I believe they traded him away to, I think it was the Texans, right? I can't remember exactly who it was, but Nick Emmanwori here, who a lot of people have way higher than this, he falls to pick 32, and the Eagles are happy to select him here to add him to their safety room. Now, let me know what your thoughts are on my mock draft in the comment section below. If you did enjoy, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much, and I am super pumped to get this draft underway. I'll be live streaming, so if you want to tune in, it should be scheduled on the channel. But thank you so much for watching. My name is Parker, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.